This is Mrs.S.Pravallika, Assistant Professor, Department of AML, Aditya University. In the today's lecture, we are going to discuss regarding the software development process models, waterfall model, spiral model, and evolutionary model. So let us start with the today's session. At the end of the lecture, student will be able to explain spiral model as well as evolutionary model. So firstly, spiral model. Spiral model. Spiral model is a risk-driven software development process model. It is a combination of waterfall model and iterative model. So, what is the spiral model describes is, it is a risk-driven software development process model, and it is a combination of waterfall and iterative model. So, we already know regarding waterfall model, so where we are having a sequential process, so a step-by-step process, and iterative in the sense a repetitive model. So repetition in the sense, once we are done with one phase and if any modification has to be involved in that particular phase, we are just going for that modification and we are going to start off again. So this goes with the iteration, nothing but the repetition. Each phase of the spiral model in software engineering begins with a design goal, ends with the client reviewing the process. So this is what happens in the spiral model. Each phase of the spiral model begins with the design goal, ends with the client reviewing the progress. So in each and every stage, we are going to focus on the client review. So we are just beginning with the goal, and every phase ends with the client reviewing the progress. So based on the client's review, we are going to end that particular process. And the development process in the spiral model in SDLC, nothing but software development life cycle, starts with small set of requirements, goes through each development phase for those set of requirements. So what happens in the development process is, each phase is beginning with a small set of requirements. So every phase will be going on with a small set of requirements, and when going on through the each development phase for those, and it goes through the development phase for those set of requirements. For the requirements what we specified, we are going to have the development in that particular phase. So this is what happens in the spiral model. So this is a representation of the spiral model, where we can see the first phase: plan, risk analysis, engineering, and evaluation. So first, the planning. So the planning will be done in the first phase, and then we are going to the risk analysis, where we are going to monitor regarding the risk management as well as prototypes. Then the next phase is engineering, where we will be having design, coding, integration, testing, and implementation. And the last phase is evaluation. So completely these were the stages involved in spiral model, and we already know it is a combination of waterfall as well as an iterative model. So that means all the phases will be repeated again, one after other. So let us have in detail explanation of these four stages. So first stage is planning. The primary purpose of the planning phase in the spiral model SDLC is to collect, understand, identify the core objectives. So we need to collect the requirements, we need to understand the requirements, as well as we need to identify the core objective of the project. So this is what happens in the planning phase. So next phase is risk analysis. In this phase, the developer team will identify all potential risks that will arise during the software development process. So what are the potential risks, or else what possibility of risk can we expect, or else what is the percentage of risk that we can encounter. So the potentiality to identify the risk will be done by the development team in this particular, in the risk analysis. So they are going to identify the potentiality of risk. So next phase is engineering. This phase starts with the designing the leading software by idealizing the prototype design, and that prototype design will be a guideline for software architecture, logic, front end, and final design. So what happens here is designing the leading software by idealizing the prototype design. So prototype design in the sense, so the basic structure what we have designed, the basic implementation what we are going to do. So not everything will be done just by theory. So we'll be having a basic plan. So for every phase, for every project what we are doing, or else for every action what we are doing, we'll be having some basic structure. So prototype design is also a basic structure which we are designing. And what happens is, starts with designing the leading software by idealizing the prototype design. We are just starting the engineering phase with a basic structure. And this prototype design will be a guideline for software architecture, logic, front end, and final design. So what are all the things to be involved in this? So what the requirements we require, or else what are the things that we need to involve in particular design, in this prototype design. So this prototype design will be acting as a guideline for us. So for software architecture, what we are going to design, as well as the logic what we are going to do, as we are the front end what we are going to develop, and the final design. So final design also will be done based on this prototype design itself. So this is the things done in the phase of engineering. Next phase is evaluation. After the launch of software project on the client's side, the client is open to share the feedback and insightful observations about the software. So evaluation. So once we are done with the project, so it will be launched on the client side, and the client will be able to share the feedback and insightful observations regarding the software. So this is what happens in the evaluation phase, where they are going to evaluate how the software is working. So they are getting the feedbacks, or else they are just looking for the insightful observations regarding the software. So this is regarding the spiral model. So let us see next about evaluationary model. So the next one is evaluationary model. The evaluationary development model divides the development cycle into smaller incremental waterfall models in which users can get access to the product at the end of each cycle. So what happens in this evaluationary model is, so in this model, the development cycle is divided into smaller incremental waterfall models. So incremental waterfall models in the sense increasing increment, in the sense increasing order. And already we know waterfall model. So what happens in the waterfall model? So once we are done with one phase, we are moving for the next phase. So what happens here? We are just starting with the requirement analysis phase. We are just ending it at the maintenance phase. So one phase after another phase, we are just having an increasing order. So this is what the evaluationary model describes, and in which users can get access to the product at end of each cycle. So at the end of each cycle, the users is getting access towards the product. Next one, feedback is provided by the users on the product for the planning stage of the next cycle, and development team responds often by changing the product plan or the process. Therefore, the software product evolves with the time. So what happens here is, the feedback will be collected, or if the feedback which is provided by the users on the product for the planning stage of the next cycle, the development team responds to that particular feedback often by changing the product. So often by changing the product, in the sense we are not going to change the complete product, we are going to change the things whatever the customer is expecting to have, as well as we are going to change the plan as well as the process. So by doing all these modifications, we can make sure that the software is evolving with the time. Next, all models have a disadvantage that the duration of the time from the start of project to the delivery of the solution is very high. So every model, every software model, whatever we are working with, will be having a disadvantage, that is regarding duration of time. So that means the start of project and delivery time does not match, or else the time varies. So sometimes the start of project will be with the less time, whereas when coming to the delivery time, it will be exceeded, it will be high. Whereas this evaluationary model finds a problem with a different approach. So what happens here is, the evaluationary model suggests breaking down work into smaller chunks, prioritizing them, and then delivering those chunks to the customer one by one. So what happens in this evaluationary model is, it is suggesting the breaking down of work into smaller chunks. So prioritizing each chunk and delivering those chunks to the customer one after one. So by doing this, the work will be easier. So next one, the number of chunks is used and the number of delivers is made to the customer. So based on the number of chunks, so we are going to have that many deliverables towards the customer. So the main advantage is that customer confidence increases as he constantly gets quantifiable goods or services from the beginning of the project to verify and validate his requirements. So what was the main advantage of this is, we are going to increase the customer's confidence as he is getting constant updates regarding the project, as he is getting the quantifiable goods and services regarding the project. So he can verify them and he can validate them. So the model allows for changing requirements as well as the work broken down into maintainable work chunks. So by breaking down them into the chunks, we can make the changes, we can make the requirements in an easier way. And this is the complete outline of the evaluationary model. So where we can see the outline, so outline in the sense, so what we discussed, simply we are going to have a prototype, and based on that prototype we are going to have the complete design of the things. So from the outline we are going to have the specification, so nothing but the initial versions here. Then we are moving to the development, where we can get the intermediate version, and after complete validation we can get the final version. So this is completely regarding the evaluationary model. So the next model is evaluationary model. So let us see in detail about evaluationary model. So the evaluationary development model divides the development cycle into smaller incremental waterfall models in which users can get access to the product at the end of each cycle. So what happens in this evaluationary model is, it will be dividing the development cycle into smaller incremental waterfall models. So dividing the development cycle into smaller incremental models, in the sense, we already know waterfall model. So what happens in the waterfall model is, from the requirement analysis phase to the maintenance phase, we can see an increasing order in the phases. So this is what happens, and here it will be done on a smaller incremental waterfall model. So that means we are involving many waterfall models here, in which users can get access to the product at the end of each cycle. So here what we are doing is, we are involving the users and we are providing the access to the at each end of the cycle. We are just providing them access. Next point, feedback is provided by the users on the product for planning stage of the next cycle, and development team responds often by changing the product, plan or the process. Therefore, the software product evolves with time. So what happens here is, we are just gathering the feedback. So as we are providing access towards the customers, at the end of each cycle, we are just getting the feedback from the users based on the product. So for the planning stage of next cycle, we are just gathering the feedback. And what happens next is, the development team responds often by changing the product, plan or the process. So the development team immediately responds towards the feedback, and based on the customer requirements, it is just changing the product plan as well as the process. Therefore, the product evolves within the time. So by this, we can get the software product within the time. Next point, all models have the disadvantage that the duration of time from the start of the project to the delivery time of solution is very high. When comparing with all the models, what happens in the software process models is, the time duration of start and the delivery time of the solution is very high. So once we are starting at one particular time, we are just mentioning one point of time, but we might not able to deliver in that particular time. So many models, or else all the models, will be having this particular disadvantage. So for this particular problem, the evaluationary model, it shows some different approach. So solves this problem with a different approach. So what is that approach is, the evaluationary model suggests breaking down the work into smaller chunks, prioritizing them, and then delivering those chunks to the customer one by one. So what it does is, it is just breaking down the work into smaller chunks, prioritizing each chunk and delivering those chunks to the customer one by one. So the work will be delivered to the customer one after one in the form of chunks. So the number of chunks is huge, and the number of delivers made to the customer. So based on the chunks, that many deliverables will be done towards the customer. The main advantage is that customer's confidence increases as he constantly gets quantifiable goods or services from the beginning of the project to verify and validate his requirements. So the main advantage here is, so the customer will be constantly getting updates regarding the project in a quantifiable goods and services from the beginning, and he is able to verify and validate his requirements. And this model allows for changing requirements, as well as all the work is broken down into maintainable, workable chunks. So this model is allowing us to change the requirements, as well as the work is broken down into maintainable work chunks. And this is the representation of evaluationary model. So outline, and from here we will be having the specifications, where we will be having the development, where we will be having the validation. And here we can see the initial version, development, intermediate version, validation, final version. So small deliverable chunks. So specifications will be done, and one chunk, development one chunk, and validation one chunk. So the specification, it will be the initial version which was given to the customer, development next one, and validation final one. So this is regarding the evolutionary model. So let us see the differences between waterfall model, spiral model, and evolutionary model. So differentiation among them. So here we can see the criteria. In that criteria, we can see the development approach, structure, phases involved, and the requirements handling in terms of waterfall, spiral, and evolutionary models. So first one, development approach. So development, the waterfall model happens in the linear and sequential order. Spiral, it is happening in the iterative and driven development, and evolutionary, it happens in iterative and incremental refinement. So when coming to the structure, so the waterfall model is rigid. So rigid in the sense, each phase must be completed before we are beginning with the next phase. So here the work will be done in a standard way. Next one, flexible. Spiral model, here the structure will be flexible. Iterations flow for revisiting earlier stages. So iterations allow revisiting earlier stages in the sense, so if any modification is done, again it is flexible for us to move towards the phase which we have already done with. So iterations, so repeating the process again. So the next one, evolutionary model, is also flexible. Product evolves with each iteration. So when coming to the structure, waterfall model as a strict model where we need to complete one phase, then we need to go the next phase, but there is no scope of coming back again. So it is a fixed one, whereas the spiral and evolutionary models are flexible. Next one, phases involved. So what were the phases involved in the waterfall model? It is already fixed. So there we can see requirements, design, coding, testing, deployment, and maintenance. Whereas in the spiral model, we will be having repetition of phases where in each phase we will be having planning, risk analysis, engineering, and evaluation. Whereas in the evolutionary model, it varies. Rapid prototyping followed by the development iterations. And when coming to the requirement handling, requirements must be known from the beginning and are fixed. So based on the requirements we know, we are just fixing them from the starting itself in the waterfall model. And in the spiral model, requirements are refined in the each iteration can change as the project progresses. So based on the project progress, we can change the requirements here. And in evolutionary model, requirements are gathered and refined progressively based on user feedback. So based on the user feedback, we are going to refine the requirements. So this is regarding the differences between waterfall, spiral, and evolutionary models. At the end of the lecture, student will be able to demonstrate the spiral as well as evolutionary models. And by the complete session, students can analyze the software process models like waterfall model, spiral model, and evolutionary models. Thank you.